Here's another 10 VYou videos. This is sort of a miscellany of different philosophical topics, some of them solidly within the domain of philosophy, some of them verging off into other directions. But there they are, and I hope you enjoy them and find them thought-provoking.
Well, now this is a really good question, and I am going to make this a topic for another one of the Dr. Sadler Chalk and Talk series videos where I get to talk for maybe 12 to 15 minutes instead of just 2, because it's a good starting point, but philosophy in fact goes beyond just informing or persuading when it's done right, and incorporates both of those and includes some other things as well, and tries to introduce some reflective position on informing and persuading. Should philosophy inform? If by philosophy you mean something like a philosophy, a philosophical system, or maybe the class in which we discuss these things, yeah, it should inform. I mean, if I'm teaching you an intro to philosophy class, I should tell you that Plato had a theory of forms and that Aristotle disagreed with Plato on certain things, and I should tell you that René Descartes, in some ways revolutionized philosophy, and that Kant claimed to have done a Copernican turn, whether he actually had or not. I should actually inform you that there's a difference of opinion on those sorts of things too, and say, well, here's one interpretation, here's another interpretation, and I should go further by saying, here's why they disagree with each other, and this is where we get to the persuasion part. If I think that Plato is right about things, I should tell you why, and if I'm doing that well, I should be, persuading you. But I should also, I think, that an important part of philosophy is not just presenting your own views, even if you reason them out over time, but presenting the whole range and saying, here's another view, and here's what it's got going for it. Here's why I think that the view that I've selected is better.
So this is a question that looks like it was sent to me a while back, and I let slide. How do you know this isn't all just a dream? And that's an interesting philosophical question. I'm not going to be able to provide you with a perfect answer within the 2-minute scope, or rather 1 minute and 40 seconds that I've got left. Yeah, that's a question that gets posed not only in Western philosophy but also in Eastern philosophy. And one person you're going to find grappling with that very famously is René Descartes. He's not the first person to pose it. I mean, you find some other people actually discussing it in ancient and medieval philosophy too. But Descartes, he points out that there's a lot of things that happen when we're dreaming that we take to be reality, and then we wake up from it and we say, oh man, that was a dream, that wasn't real. Sometimes we're very happy, and sometimes we're kind of disappointed. Now Descartes thinks that there's a certain, by the time he gets to the end of his meditations, there's a certain consistency that we have in real life that dreams don't have. This is really dumbing it down, or oversimplifying, but that's his answer to it. Do we wake up out of this sort of thing to yet another level and say, oh wow, now that's reality, this was only a dream? It's an interesting thing to think about, though, because what mystics and sometimes other religious people talk about, as a metaphor. They talk about this as being sort of a sleeping state, and the sleeper awakes. So what is a soul if everything can be changed about a person physically and mentally? Well, notice that you are begging the question, aren't you? If everything can be changed physically and mentally. That's not something that's already established. I mean, you can take that as a hypothesis and then go forward from that. So that's what I'm going to think about in this case. Because I don't actually think that every single thing can be changed physically and mentally. I think that there are at least some constants or limits, or at least there could be ranges in which things, fluctuate but remain more or less the same. Something comes in to replace that which is going out, and that's what classical philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, who believed in souls, actually taught. A soul, in classical philosophy, is the principle of life. It's something which, if you're a Platonist, sort of inhabits the body and leaves it behind. If you're an Aristotelian, it's the form of the body, and then, there's a lot of discussion about, well, if the body goes, what happens to the soul? And Aristotle seems to have thought, well, that's it. Thomas Aquinas, who was an Aristotelian, had to, come up with some way of explaining that. The soul itself is changed. It's something which admits of changes, and it allows personal identity, or it is your personal identity over time and through eternity, but it changes all the time. Like Plato says, the same knowledge isn't even the same knowledge in your head, from 1 week to the next. That's why you have to keep relearning things. So the fact of change doesn't really pose a major problem for the existence of a soul. As a matter of fact, what is a soul determinately? It's mostly all these things which are fairly fixed but can change bit by bit by bit.
So these are actually two different questions. How do I remind myself I have value? How do I keep a positive perspective? Lots of answers to these. And so I'm not going to try to run the gamut of different responses to these. I'll just give you my take on it. How do you keep a positive perspective? Figure out what you actually want to be positive about. There's some things that you can do just physically to help make yourself feel better. Exercise, not drinking, eating, those sorts of things to excess. Getting enough sleep, believe it or not, which I haven't had for several days myself. But you have to focus, you have to make a deliberate effort quite often to focus on what is positive. And again, I think I may have brought this up, don't let the best become the enemy of the limited good that is actual. How do you remind yourself you have value? Well, first of all, figure out what is valuable about yourself. And I would just say two things. One is be very realistic. Focus in on what you do have that's valuable, either to yourself or to other people. There's stuff that's there, but you have to actually focus in on it. And if you have all sorts of crazy ideals, imaginary things, those just get in the way. The other thing is, this question came up as a response to one of the questions about religion. People in major religious traditions, they all basically teach that the human being is valuable qua human being, as, say, created in the image of God in Judaism and Christianity. That's important. There's reasons why religious people get something out of that. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Do I believe in the power of positive thinking, that we attract what we want and so forth? Yes, in a very limited way. I don't believe in the sort of Norman Vincent Peale things, or the self-affirmation, looking in the mirror and saying, every day and every way I'm getting better and better and better. And personally, I would say, I'll be quite honest with you, temperamentally, that sort of thing tends to turn me off. I tend to see that as being unrealistic and Pollyannish. And I may not actually have such good reason for thinking so. It could be irrational bias on my part. My experience has been through life, and I have actually seen a lot of death and a lot of grief and a lot of disappointment, uh, and a lot of other people getting ahead where I seem to be stuck in things during the course of my life. And I've seen a lot of bad things happen to good people and a lot of good things happen to bad people. So I have a very hard time, based on my temperament and based on my experience, thinking that positive thinking by itself is going to do much for you or actually attract things. As a matter of fact, I think that if you do it too much, you tend to attract con artists who will take advantage of you. Or you'll just, attract the kind of people who put you into an organization and get everything they can out of you. I do think that it is important in a very restricted, realistic way to think positively about things. Because if you don't, then you won't make attempts. And you have to make attempts and take risks in order for anything to happen. Okay, so this is a set of really deep, tangled questions that I think, again, I should start doing that today. Recording some longer responses on YouTube to these sort of questions, because these are great questions. Is there such a thing as love at first sight? I guess it really depends on which variety of love you're talking about, because there is more than one sense to the term. The most absolutely lasting love, could that be initiated from the very start with a person? I don't see any reason why not to. I think that would be exceedingly rare, and I think that there's a lot of facsimiles of it that often seduce us into thinking that we're deeply in love with a person. I know I've been taken in many a time. I'm somebody who has thrown himself into relationships quite easily. That's a whole different story. Soulmates. Yes, I do believe there are soulmates. I don't believe that everybody has a soulmate. And this actually raises a really interesting question. I've been debating off and on with a colleague of mine who likewise takes very seriously the notion of a providential ordering of things, sort of not only a theological but a metaphysical and moral doctrine. And the question is, let's say we have vocations. Some people have a vocation to marriage. Do they have a vocation to it in general, or do they have it as a vocation to this person in particular? I've been arguing for quite a while that there are at least some people who have not only a general vocation like that, but a very specific vocation, and they won't be truly happy until they're with the person who they ought to belong to and belong with, and who will likewise, fit into their life. And I know that experientially to be true because that's my case. So this is a follow-up to a question about whether I believe in soulmates or people who are, the one for each other. And they're asking, does having a soulmate or being a soulmate mean a, quote, perfect marriage, no harmony, no fighting? Is that an illusion? Well, so a couple questions here and a couple answers. To the last one, is that an illusion? I don't think it's an illusion per se. I think it's possible. I can't say I've ever seen it in my life. And I suspect that unless the two people are just absolutely perfect morally, they're gonna fight, because what do we fight over? We disagree about a lot of different things, and a lot of our fights are not so much just because we don't see eye to eye on things. It's the way we don't see eye to eye, and the assumptions that we make about the other person, or the impressions that we give them, and then how it feels to them and how it feels to us. And one person gets angry, and then of course the other person gets angry at them for getting angry, and these are very common things. And I think that you can have soulmates, and the key is not to not fight at all. The key is to fight fair, And that often takes a lot of learning. I know it took me years to learn how to fight fair because I was a ruthless arguer, debater, fighter. I would pull cheap shots and I would hold grudges and things like that. Again, this is one that I think I'm going to explore in some longer YouTube question answer things. And I actually have a theme for it now. I'm thinking of calling it Chalk and Talk. So, all right.
Well, peace is one of those words that means a lot of different things to different people, so you have to be really careful when you're using it to try to figure out what other people mean by it. What do I mean by it? Two things. In its real sense, I think peace is actually not just absence of conflict. I think it's when your will is in genuine harmony with the wills of other people. But that's difficult to achieve or to hold on to. And it requires a lot of discipline and effort and putting up with a lot of crap, quite frankly, and learning how to live with that in order to attain that. In a more generic sense, when I'm talking politics, I'm okay to use peace to talk about a state where conflict has been brought to at least a temporary end.
Well, I think I would have wanted to know three things, and they're all pretty big things, and they have to do with how I would, run my life. So, the first thing, the most important thing is the woman that I'm with, my wife, is the woman who I was always supposed to be with, and took a long time to figure that out, and a lot of work and heartache and things along the way. So it would have been kind of nice to know that from the beginning, because we met back in high school 25 years ago, and more than 25 years ago. So, I mean, I could have cut out a lot of time, and we could have had an extra 25 years together. I wish I would have known just how much where you go to school and who you know matters when it comes to getting jobs, publishing, all that sort of stuff in philosophy and in other academia. There's a definite class system, and it's got a lot of levels. And I had the test scores. I could have gone anywhere I wanted, but I came from a family where nobody went to study anything, let alone go to graduate school in philosophy. So if I'd known that, I would have probably gone other places, and I would have capitalized on that. And then the third thing is I had a lot of deaths in my life, and eventually, it culminated in after both of my parents were dead, having to handle my mom's estate and figure out what to do with the money. And I didn't do things well with it, so I would do that again too. I wish I knew about that.
So my spiritual beliefs, philosophically, you would call me a Christian Platonist, which makes me also a personalist, and that means that I think that persons are spiritual realities that also have materiality through their bodies and exist in the world. I believe that God is the ultimate reality and ground of being and ground of goodness and other qualities. That we exist both in time and in eternity. I also believe that other religions, other religious traditions have interesting things to say about this that are often quite on target. And I get into arguments about this sort of stuff with my colleagues. So that's about it.